Hello, all the crazy people out there. My name is Michael. I like wizards and dragons and making games. Welcome back to making Bullet Hell games in Game Maker. Last time, a bunch of 3D models were loaded into the game, and they are rendering in the background correctly, more or less. And today I'm going to be expanding on that and turning it into an actual, level scenery. Alright, let's see. This is the task list for today. Every room gets a background layer. Backgrounds are comprised of 3D objects, etc. Alright, let's get into this. So the first thing that I need to do, I think, is in room start or some other such event, I am going to want to in each level struct, I'm going to want to create something in the vein of an array, and the array is going to be the array is going to come pre-populated with a bunch of objects in the world, and they're going to fill the screen more or less. Right? So let me collapse all these. Alright, that's just methods. I can do this up here. We can say self.level objects is going to be equal to, let's say, an empty array. And then repeat, let's say, and I'll smooth this out later, but let's say repeat 100 of these. We are going to array push self.level objects. And let's just make these a struct containing like an x. Can be a random number between 0 and the room width. Y can be a random number between 0 and the room height. The 3D object can be a random element from the game controller.meshes.woodlands. So we're gonna pull a random element out of this, and this is give me a minute to write some rather ugly code, and I'll make it less ugly as soon as I finish. This is a situation where I often like to write a random element from array method so that I don't have to type out this. Someone informed me circa yesterday that you can actually to do a random element from array. Script execute extended, and you can use this old trick. You can call script execute extended with the choose function and the array that you want to pick a random element from, and this will select a random element from the array. You can see what it's doing. Script execute extended will execute a script. This predates being able to call GameMaker GML scripts with a parentheses notation. And you can pass it in an array of arguments with the extended version of the function, and choose will select a random element from its arguments. I am not going to be doing this because I think this is not legible code at all. So instead, if you'll allow me to go into my my miscellaneous code file and define a function, let's say instead of all the other array functions begin with array underscores, so I'm gonna say this can be called array get random element, and this is just gonna return basically what we had before. Array index I random, array length of the array -1, because I random is inclusive. And we can just, we can use this, we can call this function, on this array, and that's going to get a random element. All right, and now if we go into the draw event of the world, and maybe at this point I should put a draw method inside the level struct, but as long as it doesn't get too crazy, I won't do that yet. The matrix, first, I is 0, and equals array length, self.level dot, what did I call it? Level objects? I always do like to iterate over arrays like this so that you don't have to call the array length function a million times. So we can get the object at each position in the array, and then the matrix can be object.x. Y can be object.y. I will introduce scaling later on. And instead of doing this big ugly thing to get the mesh that we're going to draw, object.mesh. And this should draw, what, 100 or so? Is that what I made it? 100 or so level objects. Self.level objects cannot be resolved. Oh, you know what that probably was? Room start. If self.state is equals game states dot gameplay or whatever. Eventually, I'm sure there's going to be something that I put on the title screen, like a randomized level background on the title screen, a scrolling level background on the title screen or something. But we can start with this. All right, do sub 2 undefined value. What am I? Array get random element. Oh, you know why it is? This is not an array. This is a struct. That's gonna slow me down a little bit. For all that it matters, it could be an array. There's really no reason that it needs to be a struct. I don't really need to index any of these by name or anything. So I think instead of saying output or struct access or file name is going to be equal to the vertex buffer, I can just array push the vertex buffer onto the output struct, and now it's going to be an array. Okay, yeah, you can't really get the length of a struct the same way that you can with an array. I mean, you can. There's variable struct get name count, but anyway, we have a bunch of 3D objects being drawn in the background. That's great. Let's see. Let's start committing changes. One is going to be. This is. And I like to keep my commits like small and atomic. We can say that's going to load a struct instead of an array. We can also commit array get random element. We can define a bunch of level objects in a level. And we can draw all of the level objects in the level. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to have these scroll. So there is something akin to an update method in this level struct, and I can say for each element in the self.level objects array. Once again, var object is going to be equal to self.level objects index I, object dot, let's say, y plus equals, let's say this is going to plus equals 2. And that's going to cause them to scroll down the screen. All right, and now it's going to look like we're going to be like flying forward. That's pretty cool. Of course, they don't get deleted once they go off screen, and once everything's off screen, everything's gone. So that's going to be the next order of business. I am going to probably want to like define this as a macro or something like that. Macro level scroll speed or something like that. And that can be, again, if I want to define this in like units per second instead of units per step, which I like to do, because I can, let's see, if the speed was 2 times 60 is going to be 120, so we can, maybe a little faster than that, we can say that the world is going to scroll at 150 pixels per second. And then in the, oh, that was just at the top of this file. In here, we can say object.y plus equals level scroll speed multiplied by the time step scale. Again, this is not true delta time. This is just converting between units per per second in units per frame. We are not actually using delta time. This is just going to be multiplying by 1 over 60. If your game is going to lag, it's going to lag. Okay, and that's gonna have it scroll the same way, perhaps just a little tiny bit faster. All right, kind of like that. Maybe in like later levels, it'll scroll even faster and it'll feel more urgent, but that's game feel stuff. So the to have objects when they get off screen delete themselves, there's a couple ways to go about that. Probably the easiest one is actually going to be to iterate over this array backwards, and say I is equal to the array length, I is greater than or equal to 0, I, and instead of plus plus, because that would be an infinite loop, I minus minus. It would also crash the game because that would be an array out of bounds. Or we can do this, and then if object.y is greater than room height, then we can array delete self.level objects. The index is going to be I, and the number of elements to delete is going to be 1. This is going to cause objects to pop off screen visibly, and they won't actually get completely off screen before they're despawned. And that's okay. I just wanted to show that that's actually working. To compensate for that, we can say if object.y is greater than, for example, room height plus 128. I like my powers of 2. The number is arbitrary. Plus some buffer amount. Each of these objects have no concept of how much space they take up on the screen. So if I were to spawn in a really large object, or an object that had been scaled up by quite a lot, then we would still have a problem in that they would still appear to pop off screen. But that's I'm gonna impose a bit of a limitation on myself to not create an object that's going to be larger than like a radius of, I guess, 64, because they're all scaled up by 2. And then we could repeat, to spawn in some new things, we could repeat array, let's say 100, we're going to have 100 things in the background at all times. 100 minus array length self.level objects. We are just going to spawn in some more things like this. Except instead of spawning them all in at x equals random room width and y equals random room height, we're gonna spawn them all in at like y equals, say, negative 128 or so. And again, I will remove all the magic numbers and hard references and everything like that later on. But we're going to actually not have anything happen. Okay, so that's okay, they're sort of coming in waves, and I get why that's happening. It's because, okay, that was kind of dumb. There was a flower spawned in the middle of a tree trunk there. That looked kind of funny. All right. In hindsight, that should have been obvious, but it took a second or so for anything to actually despawn, and as such, everything in the game had scrolled down the screen probably about a third of the way before anything new spawned in. And that's not really desirable. One solution to this is instead of spawning in like enough objects to get us to 100 objects on screen, we could just spawn in, for example, like 2 new objects every frame, or something like that, and that will make things a little bit on the crowded side. All right, actually a lot of it on the crowded side. Even that's kind of on the crowded side still. Alright, we can spawn something in, on average, every other frame. This isn't where I was going with this, I swear. Alright, anyway, that's about good. So there's a couple ways that this could be done. Probably the easiest one, honestly, and I wish I thought of this like 5 minutes ago, is instead of just deleting something from the array, if an object scrolls off screen, objects.y is going to minus equals, let's say, room height plus 160 or so, and that's going to instead of deleting an object and recreating a new one, it's just going to shove it back in the queue. And that still is probably going to cause things to look a little bit on the streaky side. There's still a bit of a break there, which is not really desirable. But okay, they're also kind of popping in at the top. I'll attempt to hide that in a minute, because there's the initial break, and then nothing's gonna scroll off screen for a little while, and then we'll start scrolling again. Okay. Anyway, that's better. I'm also going to, when we scroll out the screen, I'm gonna randomize the X position. Object.x is gonna also equal random room width. And that's so that it doesn't look as repetitive. It doesn't look like the same set of objects is just repeating. And I'm also going to... object.mesh is also going to be randomized, like re-randomized when it scrolls off screen. So, once again, so that it doesn't look like the same things are spawning in every time. Alright. Like, I didn't notice a pattern to the objects that were spawning in. I don't think I would have really, like, noticed unless I was looking really hard at it, but because I know that someone's going to look really hard at it and is going to say, hey, your levels are repeating, I'm gonna re-roll them anyway. Alright, so that's basic scroll. To smooth this out a little bit, and so that we don't have like the breaks in the scenery. One, I'm going to make this a macro. So this can be macro level background objects, and this can probably be determined by like a gameplay quality setting or something like that. We can initialize this to like 160 or so. I'll go with 150 level background objects, and we can repeat this. And we can initialize the array to this. Array push, doing array push 150 times will have a non-zero performance cost, and since this array is going to be of a fixed size anyway, I can't address that. I'm going to do that later. I'm also going to time it so that I can see if we actually save any time by doing that. Let's see. X can be a random value between 0 and the room width, that's fine. Y can be a random range between like -1... let's say, what would be a good value? -32 and room height plus 32. And that should appear to smooth out the breaks in the scenery just a little bit. Alright, I'm going to make the range a little bigger. It still has a gap, as you can see, but it's going to be much smaller because there is a much larger buffer zone. Alright, that's pretty satisfying. If I were to just let this go, I would think it would be rather difficult to actually notice any repetition or, like, RNG weirdness. So this is I think I'm gonna say this is okay. Alright. These 64s, this scroll buffer at the bottom here, room height plus 128, I think that's gonna be okay. I'm gonna leave those as magic numbers because I don't think I'm ever gonna revisit this code. Whereas values such as the level scroll speed, I could see myself wanting to edit later. Things like the number of objects in the background, I could see myself wanting to edit later. Okay. So, let's see. How long is it going to take? We can say var t0 is going to be get timer. How long is it going to take to actually generate all these objects when you start a level? I didn't notice a hitch or anything like that when I entered the room, but I would like to know all the same. There's every chance that what I'm about to do will qualify as a micro-optimization, but I do want to find out exactly how expensive this operation is before we really do anything there. Show message. Initializing the background took. We can say get timer minus t0. We can divide this by 1,000 to give us the time in milliseconds. And this is just going to. Do I have the correct number of parentheses? Yes, I do. This is going to tell us how long this takes. 0.1 milliseconds, 0.3 milliseconds, 0.2. Why are we... Oh, you know what? I'm doing that inside the repeat loop, aren't I? Alright, that was probably a bad idea. That's kind of dumb. Alright, that took about, say, 3 frames, which I think will count as a hitch. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to initialize self.level objects to this, and then I'm actually going to do a for loop. And instead of saying array push, we can just assign the struct into the array like this. And this should be noticeably faster. I deleted my timing code, didn't I? Alright, let's try this now. And that took about half the amount of time that it did the first time, which is good. Also, this will scale better than doing array push if you wanted to increase the level background objects to something like, if I'm gonna... hang on. Let me copy this. I will come back to it. Let me just, like, paste this in an empty notepad window or something. If I were to go back to the array push strategy, and if I were to make this instead of 150, if I were to make this something like, let's say, 400 background objects, and this is going to be a very crowded screen. This is a little unrealistic, but this is going to take significantly longer, I think. 1.04 milliseconds. So you can see it's the amount of time it takes to do that is growing. Whereas if I were to go to the new version and initialize 400 of these, it should scale quite a bit better. Wow, really? It actually took about the same amount of time. That's very peculiar. Well, whatever. I've already written this. I like this version better. I'm going to keep it. Let's see. I can commit some changes. We can say... Alright, objects are going to scroll, and they're going to also cycle when they leave the screen. So, let's see. This is not technically done yet. I want to actually attach data to each level to like tell them which objects to load. This is basically that's basically done. That's basically what we did. Each level will have its own list of background objects to draw from. Again, we will do that. Separate resolution scales for background and foreground. I don't think I'm going to do that. I think what I'm going to do instead is, like, have a quality setting that will affect the number of level background objects. So that you can try to draw more or less things depending on like, what you're running the game on. If you're running the game on a Raspberry Pi, you probably don't want to be drawing as many of these. There's also a bit of an optimization when it comes to the Raspberry Pi of... Oh, no, there isn't. Because the position is going to be updated every time, and I won't be able to, like, pre-cache the matrix. I could do some things like, doing some additional shader magic so that I don't have to, like, recreate the transform matrix every time, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Alright. Okay, let me think about this for just a minute. So, I want each level to have their own, like... I don't want them to all pull from the same... set of 3D objects. So everywhere where I have gamecontroller.meshes.woodlands in this code file here, when the array is initialized and when the mesh is rerolled when it resets, I'm going to pass this into the level constructor as a parameter. This can be level type, and the game controller. We can start by doing something like this, by passing this in as a parameter to the constructor. And instead of pulling from a hard-coded array, we can parameterize this. I'm going to want to, I think, save that as an instance variable so that it's accessible in, for example, the update method. But if I make that change, other than just rearranging some code, it should work exactly as it did before. All right, great. There's still the matter of like the color of the background. Right now it's just C_black. I would like that to be like I would like to clear the screen to other colors before we draw anything. That's going to be another part of this. So first, let us commit a change. I will not commit the changes to this room start event yet because I will be making further changes to that shortly. And let's see. There's going to be, I think, a couple of different properties that each level is going to possess. One might be obviously this, but also the color of the background. So a sandy level should have a different background color than a woodland background. So I'm going to give this a second value, a second parameter to the constructor. I'm going to call this C underscore. What are the different green types? All right, it's just green, and I think C underscore lime. So I can give that as a second parameter. We can say level type and level color or something like that. All right, and that's going to be C underscore green. And in the draw event, draw clear. We can clear the screen to the color of self.level.level color. And that should give us a green background. Let's see. On the title screen again, it's just black, and here it's green. All right. I kind of would like this to be a little bit darker. I'd like there to be I'd like the background to be a little bit more like muted, right? So that the foreground stands out, the things in the foreground stand out a little bit more. There's a couple ways I could go about doing that. One is that I could literally just darken the color of everything. I could draw like a 25% black shade over everything. I could use a couple different color blending tricks. I could do something like put an outline over all the objects in the foreground, all the bullet hell related gameplay objects. There's a couple ways that could go. Let's see. I think C underscore green is a bit bright though. So if I were to, and I don't have to say like make color RGB anymore, do I? Well, there's always the hex literal that you could use for color in GameMaker, but there's now like the color literal. So I could say 0 on the red, something like 40 on the green, 0 on the blue, and I wouldn't have to worry about byte order. Byte order would be the same for this in the hex literal because it's basically a palindrome. But
hey.
All right, I think I like that background color a little bit better. Am I not shooting? Why am I not shooting? All right, my bullets aren't appearing. How come that is? What if like what if I just in room start set the game controller's depth to positive 4,000? Like what if? Okay, one, I'm gonna want to get rid of the background layer because I am in charge of clearing the screen now. Is GameMaker automatically trying to force the depth of all objects in the room to be like the depth of like the bottom layer? We don't even need a background layer in the initialization room. I'll leave it in the title screen for now because I don't have anything clearing the title screen, and that would just like cause Windows 95 to happen. Is GameMaker trying to automatically do that? I guess so. I'm back. There are no search results for depth equals in my entire code base, so I have to assume it's something that GameMaker's doing behind the scenes. All right. The backup strategy, and I might like this better, honestly, is to take all the background stuff and put it in, like, pre-draw or something. Pre-draw happens, like, after the application surface has been set, right? Draw... I don't think draw begin. Is draw begin what I want? I could look this up in the manual, but I'm lazy. And I'm gonna find this by experimentation anyway. Can I just put that code in draw begin? I can. Alright, that's easier. I don't have to deal with depth. I can just put that code and draw begin. What is this? Level background stuff. And I need a js.comment for this now, do I? There we go. I guess I can get rid of the regular draw event because there's nothing in it and everything else takes care of its own drawing. Alright, now it should be like depth, like agnostic. Because these are entire separate events, I think. I hope. I think the way it goes is that all instances draw begin fire, and then all instances regular draw fire, and then all instances like draw end fire. Alright, that was most peculiar, but I think we're done with it now. Alright, so committing some changes, dealing with the layering issues in the game world, and lastly, creating like actual sets of level data to go with each of the levels. In the same way that I might say self.meshes.woodlands and that kind of thing, I think I might expand this into a couple other things. So I can say self.like level types can be a struct containing woodlands, which contains meshes like this, and a background, or just a color with or without the U, such as, what did I say before? This was going to be 004000, the hex code. And we could also have, for example, desert is a tradition in video games. The meshes can be low-level meshes, desert. The color for this can be, what's a sandy color? I would like something with like the palette instead of just a pure color picker. FFDD99 can be the color for the desert. For something like a beach, let's see, I might do something, I don't know. For something like a beach, I would kind of want like water and sand, but I think that might be a little bit advanced for now. But regardless, we can pick a, how about a lighter sand for the beach? FFEECC is okay. And of course, I can also go and like pick a set of 3D objects for each of these. And then in room start, let's see, the room title is gonna have, oh no, the all the UI is done in the initialization room now. In the level select, each of the buttons here can set a value. So in the creation code, go to level room level 1, and we can also oh, you know what I can do that might be easier than messing with all these buttons is like map each of the like the room levels onto a just onto a level type. Does this count as over engineering? If I were to go into the level select screen and turn that on, and if I were to go to the creation code here, when you click on them, game controller.go to level room level 1. You know what, I have an even better idea, and this might count as over-engineering, but this would probably involve changing the least amount of code. And I know this is going to sound like me changing my mind about how I'm going to architect this for like the 3rd time, and I know that I should have written this out on paper beforehand, but you know, it made sense until it didn't. So instead of saying like game controller to go to level room level 1 and then setting some variable somewhere that's like level type is going to be equal to woodlands or something like that, and then being a whole thing, we could instead actually, instead of saying self.levelTypes equals this, self.levelTypes could just be like an array which are indexed by like room level 1, room level 2, the IDs, like the room IDs, or something like that. Or at the very least a struct where it's like mapping this data onto the room ID because I don't know if rooms in GameMaker are going to be like ID based forever. So we can say level types is going to be an empty struct, and then we can say self.level types, the struct help, struct accessor, string room level 1 is going to be equal to this, and room level 2 and room level 3 might also be that, but we'll get there when we get there. And then instead of like in the room start, the array of meshes that we're going to pass to this is just going to be self.level types. We are going to string the current room. Is it room like... Alright, it's just room. The array is going to be .meshes, and the color because I don't feel like typing that out constantly. The color is going to be level data.color.
Hey.
And I think this will actually work, and I think this will be easier than whatever I was going to do before. And it actually crashed because I need to decide if this variable is going to be pluralized or not. Alright, that's perfect. So that actually probably is going to save me a little bit of trouble than what I was going to do. Otherwise, I was prepared to just cut away for like 5 minutes while I added another line of code to each of the level buttons. But you know what? I like this better. Alright, that's great. So we can X out of there, and I don't think there's anything else I have to do. Loading each of the, like, level types, loading each of the meshes for the level types in each level struct would be a little bit wasteful. So we could instead load this ahead of time and then just attach it to the struct when needed. And then if for example level 2 is also going to have a woodlands theme, we could just recycle the reference to this array, and we won't have to load all the meshes into memory again and then have duplicate copies of everything. But yeah, I think that's going to be how I do it. And then if I want something like a light intensity, I can have the light color as another property set to level types, and then assign that as like a uniform to the shader when it comes time to draw and that kind of thing. But again, I don't know if I want to mess with the light intensity of all that. So we'll go with this, and I will commit this change, and I think I'm going to end this off here. If GitHub Desktop ever updates. I feel like this program here, this GitHub Desktop has been getting slower and slower, and I don't know why. Like, Git is Git. This is just a front end to Git, and I don't think Git has really changed all that much in the last 5 years or so. But yeah, we can say we organize some level data for each level. I can, before I make a release, I can go and each room gets a background layer. That's kind of what we did. It didn't take the form of a background layer ultimately, but it's kind of what we did. Each level has its own list of background objects it may draw from. We did that. Separate resolution scales for background and foreground. I am going to change this setting for the density of background objects, and I'm actually going to move this to, like, can I send this to the backlog? I want to do that. I want to revisit that when I start to build the game and I start to try and do things such as run this on a Raspberry Pi. What on earth does this... Oh, this is like a bug. This is something going wrong when you go into the settings menu from the level select screen. The settings menu is not centered on the screen. This is because the settings menu is slightly misaligned in the room editor, so that it appears centered in gameplay when the UI is on the side. Right, that's going to be a fun one to fix. Okay. I'm gonna end this off here. My name is Michael. I like wizards and dragons and making games. If you want the code for this, look for the GitHub repository down in the video description. Look for the 0.19 release. I am going to make that right now, because if I don't make this like on recording, I tend to forget about it, and then all of a sudden I tend to be like a bunch of weeks behind it. I don't know how. This is a pre-release. Let's see. I try to post about 2 game dev videos a week, one of these and one tutorial, so if you're interested in anything like this or any of the weirder things you can do in GameMaker, feel free to subscribe. I have a Patreon, so if you want to contribute towards these videos being made, look for the links to that in all the usual places. You can see some fun things like your name in the credits at the end of every video, and about once a month I post a preview of my future plans. And if you wanted to pledge, I definitely would appreciate it. Other than that, I hope you all found this interesting. We made a little more progress this time than last time, and I will see you all later. Special thanks to Army Armbuster, DJ Gibbles, Edward Holt, Game Maker, Gunnar Clovis, Kiexi, Posho, Sindra Larson, Squarecrow, Then Nothing Happened, and Zenjamin for supporting these videos. If you want to see your name in the credits or hear yourself shouted out at the end like this, head on over to the Patreon page down in the video description to join the fun.